Hey everybody, it is 11 a.m. Eastern Time. It's 4 p.m. UK time. Welcome to Veladocs Unveiled. We are delighted that you're here with us today for this incredibly exciting moment. This is the first time the world will see the Veladocs platform in action and also hear the story behind Veladocs by Docuvela. But before we get going, of course, I need to just run through a few housekeeping items. We are recording the session today, and we will be sharing that recording with you in the coming day or so. So don't think that you have to scribble down loads of notes today to keep up. Just sit back, relax, and we'll get the rewind to you within 24 hours or so. We are also planning a Q&A session at the end of the presentation today, so feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A tab that you should see on your browser. We'll do our best to get to as many of those as time allows a little bit later on. Any that we can't get to, we will email responses to those as well. That's it. Housekeeping done. With that, I think it's time to unveil Veladocs. Well, just before I do that, I want to kick off today's session with a quote, and a quote from an esteemed analyst that we had the pleasure of talking to a few weeks ago. He kicked the call off with the statement that you're seeing on screen at the moment. The statement that the world doesn't need another ECM system. And you know, the funny thing, we actually completely agree with him, which is why we're all here today, right? To unveil Veladocs and to see how to do things slightly differently. Now, bear in mind, as we go through the session today, you're going to see things that might seem very, very familiar. But again, bear with us because Veladocs actually does things very differently, as you'll see in the next 30 minutes or so. And to guide you through that unveiling process today, we've got a fantastic set of speakers. My name's Dave Jones. You've met me a little bit already. I've got the pleasure of working with the Docuvela team as a strategic marketer. My background includes time with the likes of Highland, Nuxio, and Konica Minolta. And I've also got the honor of being a member of the AIM Company of Fellows. But the two people that you've really come to listen to today are the co-founders of Docuvela, Ellen Ryan and George Steimer. Now, Ellen has 28 years of experience in content management. Her career at technology services group Alfresco and Highland Software focused on serving customers, providing expert guidance, and building long-lasting client relationships. She's well known for her ability to simplify complex technology challenges, and she co-founded Docuvela with George Steimer in May 2023. Now, George has got 24 years of experience in design, development, and implementation of content services, solutions, and products. He also spent time at TSG, at Alfresco, and at Highland, and has got an extensive track record of building innovative content services products. And part of that track record includes leading the product and engineering teams to build both the Alfresco Content Accelerator and the Alfresco Enterprise Viewer. Welcome both. How are you today?
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Dave. So I'll kick things off. For those of us with a long history of working in and around document and content management, here's a statistic that we have seen for many years, and I feel like I've seen it for the past few decades as well. 80 to 90% of information is unstructured. And this unstructured information is growing exponentially every year. I would argue that that exponent is getting larger and larger each year due to AI and other modern content generation technologies. But what I would like you to thoughtfully consider is what this means to you as an organization. This means that 80 to 90% of critical company assets are managed with software that was designed 20 or more years ago. Some date back 30 or 40 years, and even the newer content platforms that claim to be modern were designed in the early 2000s. And so when you pause to think about it, these are legacy software applications that were designed well before the cloud, well before AI, and in most cases, before we all carried around a mobile phone. So it's not surprising that these legacy applications have become costly and overly complex to maintain and expand. Their underlying architectures are holding them hostage. So we also believe at Docuvela that the requirements of a content management application have really changed and morphed over the last 20 years. Then there are three needs that stand out today that might not have been as prevalent in 20 years ago. So first and foremost, content needs to be compliant, right? It needs to be easily located, secured, managed, and retained. And we need those basic ECM functionality available to us. But the other thing that's bubbling more and more to the top is that companies are under significant pressure to manage their growing content needs in a cost-effective manner. CIOs are being pushed back on expensive legacy applications that are costing hundreds of thousands of dollars simply to upgrade or maybe add a new department. Content management systems need to be more cost effective. And lastly, integration. I feel like this has become more and more important each year. Users expect content to be ubiquitous. We expect content to be served up within our existing line of business applications and not stored and accessed separately. Content repositories must integrate with other applications in a seamless and frictionless manner. On the other side, IT does have some requirements that they need in order to implement a successful ECM solution. They require a platform that is interoperable, one that will integrate and exchange information easily. They need a system that is scalable, one that will easily scale to support large volumes of content. They need a cloud native system. Cloud first is becoming more and more prevalent, and a legacy application that has been ported to the cloud is not the same as a system that is cloud native. And then finally, they need a supportable solution. Today, many legacy applications are supported by highly specialized vendor consultants, a skill set that is very difficult to come by and even harder to hire and retain. And lastly, we need, as I mentioned before, we need our systems to be cost effective and not require millions of dollars in software, hardware, and services costs and maintenance costs per year. On the flip side, there's the user story. And users also have expectations. They need applications that are intuitive and don't require hours and days of training. They expect their applications to have fast loading times, smooth interactions, be responsive, and have stable performance across different networks and devices. Users also want a system that makes them more efficient at the end of the day at completing their tasks. And finally, users expect their content to connect to them with their day-to-day applications and with other users, and not housed in a separate system or separate software application. So that is exactly what we are building at Docuvela. Simplicity and modernization are our guiding design principles for the Veladocs product. So we strongly believe that legacy ECM systems are anything but simple. Legacy ECM vendors were born in the enterprise software generation and have aimed to be everything to everyone. And in many ways, this has caused both their architectures and interfaces to be overly complex and expensive. ECM today needs simplicity. So with our initial release, we are focusing on serving 3 use cases. Each use case is focused on providing a lightweight document management offering. So first, we can provide a lot of value to customers that are storing content in AWS, but need a more user-friendly interface to provide basic ECM functionality. AWS out-of-the-box tools are not really geared towards end users, and the interface is pretty technical at best. Users can't tag, they can't search for content, and easily view and search it. Secondly, there are large sets of content that are overmanaged in costly and complex legacy ECM applications. Sometimes they're also just sitting on file shares because it's too darn expensive to get them into those ECM systems. Veladocs provides a more cost-effective and streamlined approach to managing content that has basic needs such as ingest, secure, search, and retrieve. And lastly, Veladocs can sit alongside an ECM application, serving as a view-only portal or a read-only portal where maybe there's a large amount of users that need access to content that is published or approved. So you can keep your smaller group of users having full featured access to your ECM solution and give this broader group of users access to approved content that sits alongside of your ECM application. So from here, I will hand things over to George, who's going to delve into the underlying details of what truly makes Veladocs different.
Thank you, Ellen. I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Great.
All right. Ellen and Dave, let me know. You should be able to see my screen, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is take a little bit of a deeper look to see what Veladocs is doing differently, as Ellen as she went through. And the first thing to kind of think about is that what's really different about Veladocs in the primary differentiator is the underlying architecture. It's what lies beneath the surface. I am going to show our UI and the user interface that we provide. And we feel like that's a great interface. There's a lot of cool features in there. But what really makes us different is that is the underlying architecture. And we'll go through that now. So Veladocs is 100% cloud native and serverless. So it is a truly cloud native application that utilizes a serverless architecture. Many of the legacy ECM vendors will claim to run in the cloud, and they do run in the cloud, but they've simply ported their legacy architecture to cloud servers. Veladocs, on the other hand, being 100% cloud native and serverless, eliminates a lot of those server maintenance and costs. Our architecture also means that Veladocs is very, very scalable and scalable both up and down. Because of the way we're architecting and the way the cloud services work, you pay for what you're actually using, not the max capacity that your system needs. And one of the primary ways that Veladocs is different is the way that we are trying to promote a more open and transparent access to your content and data. And this is a very important concept that I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail and explain in the next few slides. But this is really a game changer for how organizations can work with their content within Veladocs. And finally, as Ellen mentioned many times, we are aiming to be more cost effective in promoting our simple architecture and really just kind of stripping back exactly what organizations need from ECM systems versus the legacy architectures. So I don't want to get into too much detail here, but this is an example architecture of one of the legacy systems. You have your data and storage tier, your content servers, your application servers, but you notice that's a lot of servers. Even a simple production ECM system will require 5 to 7 servers, and then you need to double that for high availability and disaster recovery. So these are all servers that need to be maintained and patched and upgraded. And it's just a lot of maintenance to maintain that environment over time. The second thing I want you to notice is that all of the legacy ECM architectures completely lock down this storage and data tier. Files and content is obfuscated behind complex file structures in either your NAS or SAN, or even if it's stored in the cloud. And you can't access that content directly. And it's the same thing with metadata and other structured data that's stored in obfuscated databases that are completely locked down. And what this means is that to do anything with your content, whether you're ingesting content, whether you're writing a custom application or have a job or other integration, you are forced to go through those legacy APIs to get to that content. Essentially, the ECM system acts as a gatekeeper that you're forced to go through to do anything with that content. And when you think about it, modern tooling likely is not going to have an integration with a legacy ECM system. So that just means more complexity, more layers of code or integrations that have to be purchased, and it's just more expensive. So we'll get into this a little bit deeper, but what we are essentially doing in a nutshell is we are replacing that legacy monolithic ECM architecture with cloud services. And we're simplifying the architecture and making everything easier and better. So peeling back the covers a little bit with Veladocs here, and I'll get into what we're doing. But the first thing to notice here is that these are all cloud services. There are no servers here. These are just cloud services within AWS. We are using S3 for cloud storage of content. And one of the nice things about S3 and using it directly is we can take full advantage of the different tiers within S3. We've talked to organizations that where their ECM system, forces them to use a single tier of content storage, which means they're paying the same amount for content that's accessed daily versus content that's accessed every 10 years. We can significantly reduce costs for customers that have content that way simply by using S3 storage tiers, where content that is rarely accessed is in much cheaper storage. The other thing you'll notice here is these are all natively auto-scaled with AWS. The nice thing about this, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that you're paying for what you actually use, and it will scale with your needs both up and down. It is possible to scale a legacy ECM system, albeit it can be very expensive and difficult, but you can scale it, but it's almost impossible to scale down. So systems that have, seasonal usage or spikes in usage, you're essentially paying for idle capacity, whereas with a true cloud native solution, you can very easily scale up and down based on your actual usage. And finally, probably the one I want to focus on here is this concept of openness and transparent access to content. So contrary to the lockdown monolithic gatekeeper that we saw in the previous legacy architecture, we want to be much more open and transparent with access to content. So what I'm going to show in the demo in a little bit is our JavaScript application that sits here in S3 as a serverless app. And we will have a set of REST services that this application uses to do things like, put content, get content, set metadata, get metadata, all those things we will have APIs for. However, we don't want to force a custom application or integration to use those APIs. So if you have a tool that can read content from S3, you can hook up that tool to the S3 bucket and read content that is managed by Veladocs. And the same thing with searching and metadata. So when you think about it, modern tooling, it's much more likely that there's going to be a much easier path for integration and access to the content if we can just go straight to the AWS services to get the content. So that's really what we're trying to get at, and we feel is a game changer for ECM. Modern application tooling, if you think about the coming disruption of AI, an AI tool integration with a legacy ECM system is going to be a lot more difficult and expensive versus just pointing that AI tool to an S3 bucket. So now we're going to get into a demonstration of Veladocs. So just as a quick disclaimer, Veladocs is currently available to select customers. However, what we're showing to you today, will undergo changes. We're working with our customers to shape Veladocs both in the UI design as well as the functionality. So we would love to talk to you and get your thoughts on what we are building and how we can build it for your organization. So I'm just going to do a quick demo here of the Veladocs UI. And we're going to start with search. And one of the things that we want to do is make it very easy for users to get to content. So rather than just showing the user a blank screen with a form, or even worse, just a blank bar, a blank search bar, we want to use this space to give users ways to get back to their content very easily. So whether that's clicking on searches that I've saved or maybe recent searches that I've run, I can very quickly do that here through these widgets. We've also talked about ways that we can use AI to suggest searches. So, we could feed into an AI engine, the user's role, maybe the last time they've logged in, and have it suggest searches that should run. Like, for example, here you haven't logged in a week. Here are some searches to catch you back up. We can also target this application to different business contexts. So we have a couple configured here, and these contexts will be configurable within the system. So we have customer documentation and accounts payable configured here, but basically this will allow you to tailor these different areas based on business needs. So accounts payable, you're searching on different things, different types of documents versus customer documentation. As I mentioned, this is just a configuration that can be tweaked per your user's needs. The other kind of nice thing we're doing here is we're color coding these, so you can very easily see the difference. Kind of as you track through the page, that you can quickly notice the different areas within the organization. But one of the things we want to do is give users with differing levels of kind of knowledge of the system ways to access the content that's accessible to them. So if you're a user that is very familiar with the taxonomy and the types and the configuration, and you want to come in and just run searches based on the metadata, you can certainly do that through this form. Other users that kind of know the system but may not have a high familiarity may want to come in and just start typing here. And a lot of systems, when you do that, it gives you only the option to search on full text. But we also want to suggest property searches, since those can be a little bit more targeted with what we're trying to find and get down to what I'm trying to find easily. So here I've typed in West, and it suggests like, hey, do you want to search full text, or are you looking for a region, West or Midwest, or maybe a company name, Midwest Rentals? And if I change this to Acme, then it gives me a different set of suggestions, like the customer name is what I'm looking for, so I can go ahead and click that. But we wanted to take that a step further to say, what if there's a very occasional user that really doesn't have any prior knowledge of how this is set up, the types, the metadata, all of that. What if we want to just give them the ability to just start typing? So here, if I type in enough, I could of course search full text. But what we're doing is we're taking this and passing it through natural language processing to suggest searches that that might make sense for what I'm trying to look for. So here I've typed Acme statements in the past 30, and it suggested some searches, maybe for invoices in the last 30 days or overdue invoices. We've talked to customers about ways where we could potentially actually return results based on this natural language search, but we feel like this approach gives you a good way to have sort of the best of both worlds of a natural language search with the consistency and the ability to return results that it's very clear as to why a result came back in the search versus didn't. So that's definitely something that we are looking at over time, and how that potentially could work in both use cases. But I'm going to go ahead here and just run a blanket search on all documents with customer name Acme, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then you'll see here that we mirror the metadata in the form here. So if I want to rerun a search and narrow down based on other metadata fields, that's very easy to do. But I'm going to focus over here on our results. We have a table. This is configurable as far as the, based on the business context, what columns appear here. For this search, there's some nice features here for the user. Like, for example, if I notice that customer name and region are the same for all of them, I can just get rid of them. I can very quickly filter down just by typing to filter down to the results if I'm trying to filter to find a certain document, whether I'm typing in trying to look for any of these fields here. Here with these documents, I can go ahead and click on them, and I could download them to zip. I could also check all of the documents and export to Excel. We've seen customers use this as like a lightweight reporting feature. And if this is a search that I run over time, I can save this and add this search to my favorites. But I'm going to go through here and just click on this document and go ahead and do that. And we're giving you a preview of the document, but one of the key things that we're doing here is we're not removing the context of the search results. So instead of just taking over the whole screen, I can see the document as well as my search results so that I can come through and make changes, so I can come through and decide if this is the document that I'm looking for, and I can just quickly page through these documents. Once I found the document that I'm looking for, I could expand it to view the entire document in a bigger screen if I want. You can also download the contents or view the properties. And here I can see the properties of the document alongside the content. This is where this user doesn't have permissions to change the properties, but if my user did, I could make changes and save the pieces of metadata here. One thing I didn't show here that I'll just show really quickly is, these columns are all sortable based on just clicking at the column there. I think that's about all the time we had for the demo, but I wanted to show a couple of other just quick things. One is we can skin this application to your, colors, logos, all that kind of stuff that organizations like. Real quick, we just did a quick dark mode to show how that could be possible, but we can certainly do that. And in certain use cases, getting content into the system may be an automated feed or a synchronization with another system, as Ellen mentioned with the view-only portal. But there are use cases where having an upload feature in the system makes sense, and we will have the ability to add content into the system via a drag and drop interface. Well, that's all the time I have today to show you this. I realize it was a quick demo. But if you'd like to see more, feel free to reach out and we'll schedule something to dive into more details.
Great.
And let me go back, Ellen, and I will go ahead and let you start sharing.
Okay, well, thanks for that demo, George. But before getting into the Q&A, I just want to summarize how Veladocs is really fundamentally changing the approach to ECM. So first, greater complexity will always equate to higher expenses. Legacy ECM systems are overly complex. Most implementation really, yeah.
Ellen, I don't think you're sharing your screen.
Yeah, no, okay. We did take care of that then. Let's want presentation. Hold on one second. Let me get to the right one. Sorry, George, I thought you were going to continue with your slides. So let me bring it up. Yeah. So I was not quite set up to do that, but I will be there in a second.
It wouldn't be a live demo if there weren't some in there. It proves that we haven't pre-recorded this. This is all going out live to the world as we speak.
Not a problem. Let me share my screen. Entire screen.
I think everybody's used to the joys of virtual meetings and screen sharing and the challenges that come with it. Right, there we go.
Are you seeing my screen?
We are seeing your screen.
Yes.
Perfect. So, as I said,
no, we're not, but keep talking, Ellen. It's fine.
Okay, perfect.
Oh,
you guys should see.
Yes, we are. Yes, we
there
are.
You go. Good. We're back on track. Thanks for the thumbs up. So like I was mentioning, greater complexity really always equates to higher expenses. Most implementations, ECM implementations that I see only utilize a fraction of the functionality and provided ECM features. So why pay for what you don't need? Second, whether running on-premise or in the cloud, legacy ECM solutions still rely on this complex server-based and database architectures. Those costs don't disappear, they just get transported to the cloud. A second differentiator is really transparency. Legacy ECM systems lock your content, as George had said, and your metadata behind proprietary APIs and database layers, limiting access and making all of those integrations more complex. Our overarching goal is at Veladocs is simplicity. We want to provide a simple yet powerful ECM platform and architecture that makes everything more cost effective. I almost said complex there. So with that, where we really see Veladocs shine is really putting ownership and control firmly back into the hands of organizations, and rather than hidden behind really what I consider a black box. Your ability to control and access your content is priceless. This benefit cannot be understated, as today's organizations require content to seamlessly integrate with other platforms. And what's becoming more and more important and expected is AI technology and other modern technology platforms. So with that, I will hand things over to Dave and we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Ellen, and great presentation. George, thank you for the demo. You're one of the few people I've ever worked with to actually do a demo to time, so you get a definite on that one. And we are bang on time. We're ready to take some questions from the audience. I can see a lot of questions coming through in the Q&A tab already, but feel free to keep asking those questions. Like I say, any that we don't get to today in the session, we'll answer via email afterwards. But let's get straight into it. George, I'm going to come to you first if I can. You talked about AWS, and obviously Veladocs is built on AWS at the moment. Someone's asking about the Microsoft platform, talking about Microsoft Azure. Any plans to roll Veladocs onto that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Veladocs is currently on AWS. That's where we're starting. We are actually in discussions with a number of customers about running Veladocs on Azure. So while we're starting with AWS, we fully plan to support both it as well as Azure.
All right. While we're talking cloud platforms, someone's asked about deployment options. What about SaaS as a deployment option, but also any sort of rollback to an on-prem variant?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the on-prem, I'll start there. While Veladocs is 100% cloud native, it actually can't be deployed in a traditional on-prem nature. However, AWS does have a product called Outposts that allows you to run kind of a private on-prem version of AWS in your data center. So if an organization would like to run Veladocs on-prem, talk to us. I think AWS Outposts is the way to go with that. When it initially, when it comes to the SaaS model, initially Veladocs will be available to be deployed in a customer's private cloud instance. So customers, if they're interested in, a managed service where, can run the gamut from us helping, manage a little bit of the customer's environment, or us taking ownership of that environment, talk to us. We can talk through that. So a full SaaS isn't necessarily something that we're focused on currently, but could be something in the future that we move to.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Ellen, I've got one for you. I love this question. I think it's a Brit asking this question because it's completely blunt. Can't I already do this in SharePoint?
Yeah. So I always think of SharePoint as a great place for team collaboration, maybe informal project documentation, but it really has a lot of serious limitations from an ECM perspective. It's not a metadata first model. Anyone who's worked in SharePoint, unless you know the exact folder location your document is stored in, it can be pretty difficult to find it. So I would say, if you think about the scenario of where a colleague comes and needs to know, right, get me this document, or maybe an outside auditor, I wouldn't want to rely on SharePoint to do my searches. Where is it stored locally? Is it stored in there? There's no metadata. Which one's the right version? you see there's a lot more control around typically uploading and controlling content in a more full-featured ECM solution.
All right, okay, my Q&A box is exploding at the moment. Someone's saying, okay, not SharePoint. What about Box?
So, Box is, I look at it as, Box is known as an electronic file sync and share tool. It has from the beginning been very folder and browser focused, similar to SharePoint. Metadata is an afterthought. They do have it, but the user isn't prompted or forced to enter anything. So once again, I need to know where my document is stored. If I have a small set of documents, I think of it that I want to share, it's a great tool for sharing externally, right? I need to keep a small set of documents secure and share it with an outside vendor. But if I'm storing thousands, hundreds of thousands of documents, do I want to store those in Box and not have great search tools, because people aren't forced to set metadata? I would tend to lean away from Box for those and once again, focus on more full-featured ECM tools.
Understood. George, I've got two questions for you. One of them I think is fairly easy. The other one isn't. So let's start with the easy one. Someone doesn't believe you. Someone's saying, will Veladocs really be 100% serverless? Is that even possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the core services that back Veladocs that, power the platform and the ECM features that we are starting with are 100% serverless. So we are storing content in S3, running storing metadata and running search through OpenSearch, and all of the other API and other services that we're using are all 100% serverless on AWS and Azure. That being said, there may be certain supporting areas where it actually does make sense. So for example, SSO integration, like, a broker server for connection to LDAP and those types of synchronizations, that may make sense to have a server. But the core components that focus on content are all 100% serverless.
Right, fantastic. So here comes a slightly harder question. Someone's looking at the practicalities and moving to Veladocs. So the question is, how does Veladocs analyze and import a current content repository? What does it need to be able to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, at its base, the content, you need the content and the metadata, and there are a lot of different ways to do that. So AWS has many different services to get content into S3. Whether that's Snowball or other types of ways to get content in. But then the metadata can be indexed in a number of ways. It could be indexed through our APIs, our REST APIs for and I guess what I'm talking about here would be more of a migration approach versus a simple, import into the application. But that metadata could be put in via our APIs. It could also be scripted with AWS. Or potentially using AI. That's kind of the great thing about being 100% cloud native is you could use AWS comprehend and textract to automate that process and pull content off. And obviously you would need some processing and testing with that to get the right confidence that what you're putting in is correct. But long story short, there's a lot of options.
And I guess that's one of the beauties of working with AWS. We haven't got a single route into this ECM platform. We've got a multitude of options to get content into the platform in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Ellen, let's talk practicalities again. What content formats can we support in Veladocs?
Yeah. So Veladocs can support and store documents of any format on day one. For our initial release, web viewable formats will be available for in-app preview. And if companies should have a broader need to support additional formats for in-app preview, we would integrate with, there's a host of advanced viewers out on the marketplace today that we could, with our API layer, just launch one of those viewers instead. So we plug into those.
Fantastic. Another one for you, Ellen, if I can do. I don't know how much of this we can share today, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What's the pricing and support model?
Yeah. So we're in discussions with initial customers to provide, a win-win scenario for them. We're working really closely with them. This could mean discounts or other incentives. So once we're past that initial phase, We will use subscription-based pricing. We're looking to make it very value-focused. So, maybe that be based on the number of users or the volume of content, but kind of using those two parameters to kind of determine what's that value that the software is providing.
All right, fair enough. I'm just looking through some of these questions now. Let's stick with you, Ellen, if I can do. Industry verticals, you talked about the 3 use cases that Veladocs is going to market with from day one. Do you see any scenario in the future where we look at industry verticals or horizontal solutions, maybe accounts payable or financial services solutions?
Yeah.
Are those on the roadmap anywhere in the future?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, those 3 scenarios up front, they tend to go across multiple industries, and that is intentional, that our initial focus, is on simple doc management across different and multiple industries. Absolutely, in the future, I from my previous experience, I love having some prepackaged, vertical solutions that help kickstart projects and provide a guidance. And that would be something we would look to provide in the future.
Fantastic. George, you're getting all the difficult questions today, I think. Let's talk about the timeline for general availability. We're getting to nuts and bolts now.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, Veladocs is available to select customers that we're working with. We are planning on having a GA sort of general availability release on the AWS Marketplace. And we're currently planning on that for later this year.
All right, fantastic. And we're almost done, but one final question. I've saved this one to last because I love it. Someone wants some. Can I get a trial? Is the exact phrasing of the question.
Yeah. So, sorry, I didn't. Were you asking?
Okay, whoever wants to take that one can take it.
Sure. Yeah. So a trial would be available once we have that AWS Marketplace instance ready. But before that, hey, reach out to us. We can figure something out. One of the great things again about the cloud is that it's not hard to stand up these environments. So talk to us. We can set something up.
All right, fantastic. George, Ellen, thank you both very much for your time today. That is all that we've got time for today. Thank you all for your fantastic questions and interaction. We've got through as many as we could do in the time that we've got today. But as I said earlier, there are some that we've missed. We will email answers to you directly after the session today. And with that, we're at the end of Veladocs Unveiled. Many thanks for joining myself, Ellen, and George today. We hope you've enjoyed the session. We hope you found it useful. And of course, if you'd like more information on Veladocs, you can visit our website at veladocs.com, or you can get in touch with us directly using the email addresses on the screen now. Thank you for joining us again today. It's been our pleasure to host you. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.